All right.
Good evening, I'm Mckell Keeney. We are here at the Pyle Center in Tempe with Michelle Hirsch. She is a longtime resident of the area and will tell us more about her experiences in Tempe over the years. Michelle, where were you born? In what town and what era?
I was born April 2nd, 1963 in Glendora, California. That's where my parents lived. And I was actually born on April 2nd. A year later, my sister, wasn't a year, it was 2 days short of a year, my little sister was born. And so we kid my mom sometimes that she was really trying to hit April Fool's Day because my sister's the day before and I'm the day after. But Glendora, California.
All right, I think you have other family in California for your grandparents who were born there?
Yes.
One out of your family?
My paternal grandparents lived in Glendora, California at the time, and my maternal grandparents lived in a little town called Eagle Rock. Some people haven't heard of Eagle Rock, but they probably have heard of Pasadena, and so it's right next to Pasadena in Glendale, California. And my maternal grandparents, Lon Farrell and Nina Farrell, they were wonderful grandparents. I spent a lot of my growing up years living with them, staying with them. They were wonderful people. And my paternal grandparents, John James Harmon Jr., he was called Jack, and we called him Grandpa Jack, and my grandmother, Louise Althea Whitney, they were married 64 years before my grandfather passed away first, and they were wonderful grandparents as well. As a matter of fact, my parents were only married a few years, so when my parents first got divorced, my little sister and I went and lived with my paternal grandparents, my Grandpa Jack and Grandma Louise, and they were just wonderful grandparents, and I always thought of them as kind of elegant and sophisticated. My grandfather was the only person I knew in our family that graduated from college. He went to MIT, and he was a very successful, accomplished architect. And just my grandmother always dressed really nice, and I remember thinking, why does it take her so long to get ready? I mean, it would literally take her like 2 hours. And now, of course, I understand why it takes that long. But their house was very elegant and nice, but they weren't the kind of grandparents that wouldn't let us run around and, sit on the furniture. I mean, we could still do everything grandkids could do, but it was just it was a little different than my maternal grandparents, who were a little less, I'd say, elegant. They were just a little bit, they were wonderful, wonderful people. Very tiny little 4-room house that they raised 3 children in. And I loved going to their house and playing hopscotch in the front yard. And my maternal grandmother, I actually like to tell this story because she was such a influence on me. She was a very tall, friendly person, and for that time, it was rather unusual to not only have your own business, but to even work outside the home. And she didn't drive, so she took the bus everywhere. And I remember going to visit her, or when I was living with her, walking to the bus and riding the bus to the grocery store, to the movie theater, to the mall, to her office building. When she had an office in downtown Glendale, and it was in a bank building. And I just thought it was so cool to not only ride the bus, and she always let me pull the cord at the right stop. I just thought that was the most exciting thing. And we would go up to the 4th or 5th floor, and there was like a frosted glass door with her name, her business and her name. And I would go in her office and flip through the Rolodex and play with office supplies. And sometimes she'd actually have me rubber stamp return addresses on envelopes, and I would staple fake papers together, and to this day I love office supplies because it just reminds me of my grandmother's. But it was just so impactful to hear her talking on the phone to clients, and just to see her dressed up in a pantsuit and go to work. And she was so friendly. that when we would go in the bank building or when we would go anywhere, people would say, "Hi, Nina. Hi, Mrs. Farrell." And I mean, I just don't think she ever met a stranger. And another story I like to share about her, because she was so wonderful, is when we would walk a couple blocks from her house, there was a neighbor lady who was always grouchy. She would be out front, she would never smile, she would never wave, but my grandmother would always say hello to her. And I remember asking her one time, "Why do you always say hi to her? Because she never says hello back, and she's obviously grouchy." And my grandma would say things like, "You just always want to leave somebody with a smile. You never know how it might impact their day. You know, there's no harm in saying hello and giving somebody a greeting." And that also rubbed off on me. I'll be in the grocery store and I'll be like, "Hello, hi." And some people might think, "What is up with that lady?" But you just never know if somebody just needs to be seen or it makes them feel better. So I get that from my grandmother, and I just loved that about her.
I love that you learned by example from her and your other grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Tell
I was
us
very
about-
lucky to have wonderful
Yes.
grandparents.
That is wonderful that you have that legacy. Tell us about how your grandparents, who first came to Arizona.
Well, it was actually my dad.
Okay.
In 1970, he
Alright.
relocated to Arizona and from California, and he was working for several companies. He was what was called like a manufacturer's rep, so he would sell lots of products in the pool and spa industry, and this is a good place for pools. And so he had a little apartment on Lemon down by ASU, and he met who I call my bonus mom. She wasn't my bonus mom yet, but he met her. She was a freshman at ASU, and so my dad was a little bit older, but he was very handsome and charismatic, and they hit it off, and pretty quick they moved in together, and a couple years later got married and bought their first house in Tempe. So it was my dad that first moved here, and then my bonus mom had a little girl that was just one. My dad adopted her, and she's every bit my sister as any other sister I have. And then they had a little boy together. That's my brother. I think he's 42 now or something. So, and I was actually right there when he was born. When I didn't move here to Tempe until '77, my freshman year of high school. My mom moved around a lot, and my dad thought, you need to be a little more settled. So how about you move to Arizona with my family, and it would be a little more settled. And so that was my freshman year of high school, about 1977. And I actually started at Tempe High.
Oh, did you? Okay.
But I went there a couple months, and I just didn't feel, part of it was probably that I missed my friends in California, but part of it was just a little bit of culture shock, and it was a big school. And I specifically remember seeing guys in cowboy hats, and it wasn't like a dress-up day. I remember thinking,
Okay.
I wrote letters to my friends saying, "There's guys that put cowboy hats on every day. This is a thing here." And so there were groups, like there were the groups of athletes, like the jocks, and so I don't remember having cliques and groups, at my old high school or my old middle school. And so there were some people suggested that I go to Corona, because we could bus to Corona.
Which was a smaller school at the time.
Mm-hmm. There was only a few hundred freshmen and sophomores, so it was a smaller student population, and I knew a couple people in my neighborhood that were going there. And so, when I first walked on campus, I felt like, okay, this is great. People welcomed me, I made friends right away, and it was a good thing for me. And an interesting side note is that when I was in middle school, my grandfather, he showed me a picture of a building that his architectural firm was working on. And he said, "This is in Tempe where your dad lives." And it was actually the Corona del Sol high school building. He was talking about how innovative it was. And I just remember thinking, it kind of looks like a prison. It's out in the middle of nowhere, and it's this brick, no windows, and who knew that a couple years later I would be going there. But I did love Corona and had good teachers and good experiences there.
All right, so that grandfather was an architect,
Mm-hmm.
correct? And he's also a painter?
Yes.
Want to tell us about that and show us what you brought?
Yeah, thanks. He was a very accomplished watercolor artist. He was commissioned. He also did it just for his own enjoyment. He gave his paintings to family. This painting right here, he gave me when I moved to Arizona. And it's a little market in San Gabriel, California. And I just loved all the colors, the fruits, and I even liked the power lines and the trees and the little scale and the writing. I just loved it, and he even framed it in green to match my bedroom at the time. It was
I like
green
that
and yellow.
part. That's gorgeous. I'm so
And
happy
I've
you got
kept
that.
it that way always. I've always wanted to go back and see if it was still there, but I have never done that.
Try Google Earth sometime.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And that one you might want to leave as is because it's kind of precarious.
Oh, thank you. This is the one he gave my husband and I when we got married. This was our wedding present, and he would let us pick out what were our favorites, and I just loved the reflection and the sky and some of the detail in the wall, and and I have paintings of his that are beautiful buildings, beach scenes in Northern California. My husband has one in his office that has like a house and some land and a bridge. And one time I asked my grandfather, where was this? And he says, I made it up. The bridge is from one place and the house is from somewhere else. And
Collaboration together. That's awesome.
Sometimes they were actual places and sometimes they weren't.
So a lot of them do have buildings in it, which was his line of work.
Oh, I never put two and two. I never put that together. Yes.
Yeah. Did he have art training, or when he went to MIT, it was just something he did as a natural talent?
Yes. Okay. He started, I know, in the late 50s, because some of his paintings are dated the late 50s. And then, of course, through the 60s and 70s. This one's 77, and I forget, this one is probably 80 or 81 or 80. I was married in 83, so.
And he signed them with his last name only, is that right?
J. Harmon.
Oh, J. Harmon, that's it, has a J with the H. That's, okay, that's his signature then. Yeah. And I have probably 27, 30 paintings in my home. That is a treasure.
And
That's
I
awesome.
look at them and I love them, and then I can go to my siblings' houses and they all have his paintings too. And usually we were pretty amicable about who would get what, but once in a while I was like, oh, my sister got that one. I really wanted that one.
Tug of war on what you wanted. And how did his artistic legacy get passed down to you and your siblings and your grandchildren, his grandchildren? Can you see that in some of the things that they do?
Well,
not necessarily with watercolor painting,
Yeah.
but just different artistic talents. I know you're on the Chandler Arts Commission, so that's always
I have
obviously
such an
important in your life.
appreciation. I have never felt particularly artistic myself.
Sometimes it skips a generation for that particular one.
I
But
do
you have
love
so many other
art,
talents.
and I love public art. I'm chair of the Chandler Arts Commission, so I support public art, and I love Tempe's public arts. So
One of your sons is in film.
he is. I do have a son that's a film.
Cinema.
Yes, he's a screenwriter and director, very talented, imaginative. And my other son is he was an actor, a stand-up comedian. He does audiobooks now, and so he's very creative and talented. And my daughter, even though this isn't her line of work, in her line of work, she creates incredible graphics, and for a while she did do websites, and she's very talented in graphic design, even though that's not exactly what she does.
Did she do blogging for a while? Or?
Oh yes, and she has a podcast that's
podcast,
very
that's what it is,
successful, award-winning podcast.
There you go.
And actually my son Tanner, he has a podcast too,
Okay.
that is all about pop culture and movies as well. So they're all, my kids are much more artistic than me, but I really encouraged that when they were younger. I remember my husband came home one day, and this one wall in our house was just painted and colored, and he was like, what happened when I was gone? And I said, they wanted a big canvas. So, and that was up in our house for a long time. So I really encouraged them to, we had boxes of costumes and lots of art supplies. Our dining room table was destroyed with paint and glitter, and I just loved it. I would cover it up with a tablecloth when people came over, but otherwise it was a very used place for creating art.
So you definitely fostered that. They had the freedom to create. Now your other grandfather, I think this is him. Want to take a look at that and tell us what you see on that is interesting to you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I definitely recognize his writing.
This is his World War II draft card.
Now, I know that he was in, was it called the Merchant Marines? I think is what it was called.
Okay.
I'm not exactly
and
sure.
tell us his name.
Oh my gosh, he did have a tattoo of an anchor.
This
is what it says right here.
It
Oh, that's so funny.
what it is and where it is.
I would have forgotten about that had I not read it on here.
Mm-hmm.
And this says he was 6'1". I didn't know he was that tall.
Well,
Wow.
I think sometimes we fudge a little bit, but maybe he was.
And my grandma was almost 6 foot, so
Okay.
I know he was taller than her, so that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
He was always sitting in a chair when I saw him when he was my grandma, so I don't remember.
That was the prime of his life then, 6'1".
Yeah,
Okay.
that's amazing. And I definitely know he did work for the Department of Water and Power in Los Angeles his whole life. Then this says that his wife is Mrs. Nina E. Farrell. That's my grandmother, who I called Mama Two.
Uh-huh.
The story goes I couldn't say grandma when I was little, so she says, well, call me Mama Two. So that's what I called her.
Mama too.
Mhm.
All right.
And yeah, that's definitely his writing, and that's him for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's yours to keep, of course. I just
Oh
found
my
it on
gosh,
Family
thank
Search
you.
today and thought you'd be interested in it if you hadn't seen it
wow.
before.
I have never seen this.
So you and I were going to sit down and work on your family tree sometime to get it a little bit more extended if you want.
Thank you.
If there's someone that you want to learn more about.
Thank you. Wow.
Of course.
Oh, wow, he's only 34. Wow.
34 at the time of the
When he
draft?
filled out this card, yeah.
All right, so you came here and went to high school, lived with your dad and your bonus mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And did you ever leave? Have you stayed in Arizona since then?
Well, I've always stayed in Arizona.
Okay.
And graduated from Corona in 1981
Mhm.
and didn't waste a minute, went right to ASU for the summer school.
Uh-huh.
And I lived in a little condo that my dad bought by the university. He liked buying properties, so he bought that for me to live in, and it was right close to the university. And actually I was 17, so was that my junior year? Somewhere in there. I met my husband now, but we met at a ice cream and sandwich place called Bobby Brannigan's. Rural and Baseline is where it was. And my husband worked there while he was going to ASU. And I would actually go in there after school with one of my best friends, and I would do my homework at the booth. And then my bonus mom would come pick me up. And one day, it was my 17th birthday. I was very shy. And, but my best friend Penny, she knew that I thought Paul was cute because he was there a lot when I would go in. And so she said, Paul, go tell Michelle happy birthday, it's her birthday. And I could hear her saying that as I'm doing my homework. And I just thought, oh my gosh, he's gonna come over here and talk to me. And he came over and I just thought he was the cutest thing. And he said, you know, you're in here all the time, you should get a job here. And that day I applied and I got a job there. And so then I was working there. And I worked there for a couple of months, and I said to my best friend and a couple other girls, you know, why doesn't he ask me out? I obviously like him. And they said, oh, he'll get around to you. He asks everybody that works here out, so he'll get to you. So I just had to wait 4 months, and then he asked me out, and then he never asked anyone else out again. So.
And where did you go on that first date?
Oh, that was so fun. It was actually, he had this story that him and a bunch of his fraternity friends were going to see Blues Brothers, the movie, when it first came out at Lake 6 Country Village Theaters there. And but then by the time it was time to go, he said nobody else wanted to go. Do I still want to go? So I guess that was his way of asking me out, but I said, yes, I'll go. So it was just us two. We went to the Blues Brothers at Lakes Country Village. When we came home, we had a wonderful time. Of course, it's a movie. There's not a whole lot you can talk about in a movie, but he said, if I can think of something fun, do you want to do something tomorrow night? And I said, sure. The whole day goes by, I don't hear from him. And I thought, how hard is it to think of something fun? Well, I didn't quite realize at the time that my husband was a poor college student. He was just trying to pay tuition and work and get by, and he didn't have a lot of extra money. So he was trying to think, what could he do that didn't cost anything? And my friend Penny came to the rescue again. I was at her house, and it was like 5 o'clock at night, and she's making a picnic lunch for her boyfriend and her to go on a date. And she calls up Paul, because she knows him, he's her boss at the ice cream place, and calls him up and says, would you want to have half this picnic lunch and take Michelle on a picnic? So we went our second date the next night to Kiwanis Park for a picnic lunch. Right. And that, then I knew he didn't have a lot of money, and it was okay. We could go on picnics, or we could go to his parents' house or something. It wasn't, he didn't have to take me anywhere fancy. So yeah, we dated for, I think it was about 2.5 years. We got married in March 12th, 1983 at Day Spring United Methodist Church, also in Tempe.
Right.
Yeah.
So that ice cream store no longer there,
No.
but the theater, I believe, has changed over the years and is now the Majestic, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that right? It's
Yeah.
now
At least they have.
the Majestic theaters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've been to Majestic many times, and we like that theater as well.
You've got a history on that corner.
That's right.
For sure.
That's a very
And
big
so
place.
your house with your dad then, was that the house that you now rent out to
Mhm.
students up at ASU? You still
Yeah.
have it in your family, right?
Mm-hmm. It was a little duplex, 2-bedroom, 1 bath on each side.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved to live with my dad, he actually knocked out a wall, so one side was a 1-bedroom, and then his side was a 3-bedroom. And we lived there, 1 bathroom, 3 bedrooms, and it was a tiny little place, but yeah. Then
Those were the days when families all shared 1 bathroom, right?
I don't even remember
My
it
family
seeming
did
like
that
a
in
problem.
California.
I mean, now, we can't seem to fit everybody in our bathrooms at home, but it wasn't a problem, and it was, my little brother was born, and it was fun to have a little baby around, and my little sister was delightful, and so, he ended up keeping them. He moved to a house, another house it's over by Double Butte Cemetery. It's Phoenix, but it's right on the border there.
Mm-hmm.
And he kept that as a rental. Then he bought the one next door, and then after he passed away, I bought the one next door to that. So that's in a neighborhood called Linden Park. It's like 5th Street and University, and or 5th Street and Priest, and 5th is just a little bit north of University.
Right.
And I love that neighborhood. It's a nice residential neighborhood. It's older, but I remember growing up there and have good memories there. And I'm actually on the neighborhood association because I own property and care so much about the neighborhood. So, yeah.
Awesome. That is amazing. So we got you to your marriage tell me where again?
We got married at Day Spring United
Day Spring
Methodist.
United, okay. And then where did you and your husband live?
We did right after we got married, right the next day. My husband actually moved a couple months before me, but after we got married, I moved down to Tucson with him. He had a job at a company called National Semiconductor. He had graduated from ASU, and at that time, it wasn't as easy for engineers. He graduated with an electrical engineering degree. Now, you could get a job anywhere, but then he had to go down to Tucson to get a job at National Semiconductor. So he was there for a little less than a year, but I just missed Tempe and our family too much. And so I sent out resumes everywhere and on his behalf, and got him hired at Microrel in Tempe, which is a company that makes pacemakers and other medical equipment and devices. So, and he worked there for a little while, and but I was just so happy to get back to town here. I just didn't like Tucson as much. Just wasn't my cup of tea.
So at that time, were you living in Tempe then again, or were you in Chandler?
Actually, when we moved back from Tucson, we had a little apartment in Mesa.
Okay.
And I don't know what it's called now, but it was called Haystack Apartments. And it was like Dobson and Guadalupe, something like that.
So it's just right by the border, though. It's close by.
Yeah, and my in-laws live in Tempe, right by Kyrene del Norte, and so I love my in-laws. At one point, I suggested we buy a house next door to them. We could all live on the same street. My husband says, I love my parents, but I don't necessarily want to live next door to them. So,
like everybody that's living across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, not so much.
But we still see them all the time. They still live in the same house on Belmar, and we visit them all the time.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, you ended up in Chandler, and I feel like in the East Valley here with these, all of our cities run together in towns, and sometimes we don't even know where the border is, right, between Tempe and Chandler going down there, because sometimes we shop in, across the border or whatever, it's all just one East Valley to me. But tell me about your activities after you moved to Chandler.
We did buy our first house in Chandler. I think that was
Uh-huh.
1982. We lived in
Okay.
an apartment for a year, and then, and it was really because that's what we could afford. We
Mhm.
looked in Ahwatukee, and it was so expensive, and
Uh-huh.
even South Tempe was expensive. So
Mhm.
we could afford a house in Chandler. It was a brand new house, and we had to build it. It was like Chandler Boulevard in McClintock,
Mhm.
and a little 3-bedroom house that we lived in for 8 years, and loved it. But then I was pregnant with our second child, and my husband said, we're kind of outgrowing this house, so we just moved a half-mile north, still Chandler, but
Mhm.
it's northwest Chandler, near McClintock and Ray.
Mhm.
And we've been there 29 years
All right.
and love our house and our neighborhood as well. But I still feel so connected to Tempe, not only because I have the rentals, but my in-laws and work I've done.
Did your mom just move to Tempe too, or where is she?
My mom did just move to
Okay.
Tempe just last week.
Right.
She was so lucky to get into a, that's my birth mom.
Uh-huh.
She was so lucky to get into a low-cost senior housing apartment. It's like 6th Street and Farmer.
All right.
And that is a wonderful thing
I
for
think that's
seniors.
the one I toured with Tempe Leadership. I was telling
Oh.
Dwayne Rowan, who's here with us,
Yeah,
before you got here, that there was one in that area.
it is
It's
great.
on the west side, no, it's on the east side of the street, is
Yes.
that correct? East side, 2 stories?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, I think it's
Is it 3?
4 stories,
Okay.
because my mom's
It's been
on the
a while
second
since I was
story,
there.
and there's a 3rd, 4th, and 5th story.
Yeah,
So
I remember it being very nice.
yeah, it's great. And I mean, until really having to help take care of my birth mom,
Mhm.
she's lost a lot of her vision, and we weren't a whole lot close after I moved here. So,
Mhm.
but we reconnected a few years ago when she started losing her vision and needed some help, and it made me aware of there are seniors that didn't save their whole life and don't have retirement income
Mhm.
and have a very, very fixed income and
Mhm.
don't have somewhere to live.
I'm so
and-
glad she was able to get in there.
2 years
that's
and
great.
2 months was the waiting list.
Oh.
So it's there's only 56 units
Yeah.
in the apartment, but it is
Yeah.
nice. It's a good thing. It's actually not funded by the city. It's a federal grant, but I know that there are, that the city is very supportive of it. So
Mhm.
I think that's great. I hope they can do more things for seniors.
Now, you're very civic minded. At one point, you ran for the Kyrene School Board and won your election twice,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do you remember what years those were?
Yes, the first time I ran was 2008,
Uh-huh.
and I had been on school district committees and
Mhm.
things like that, but when the then superintendent suggested I run for the governing board, I didn't really even know how many people were on the governing board. I didn't really know that it was an election. I wasn't
Mhm.
very political or campaign minded, so I was mostly focused on my kids' school or their classroom, not the bigger district. So I said, I don't think I'm interested, because I really didn't even know what it meant. And he says, why don't you come to this informational meeting? And I did. And I had never worked on a campaign, but I had been a community news reporter. I had been involved in my kids' school. I'd had a couple businesses. So I was involved in the community, and I just reached out to the community and campaigned a lot and won. And I'm not bragging, I'm just very proud that I won by the highest margin of anybody in the history of Kyrene, and by like 5,000 something votes. So it wasn't even just a few hundred votes, but I worked really hard and I was really excited to engage with the community. And so governing board terms are 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So then 4 years later, in 2012, I ran again and won again by a huge margin. And I really did like serving as a governing board member. It was a way to engage with the community and inform them about the school district and address problems that came up, and I did enjoy it. Now it's a volunteer position, even though you have to campaign and spend money on a campaign and all of that.
It's also
there's no pay.
nonpartisan. The
Yeah.
school boards are nonpartisan.
And that's a very important piece of it, because you don't get involved in divisive politics, or you shouldn't, you know. Things are getting a little more political these days, but I was very nonpartisan. I was welcomed at Democrat meetings and Republican meetings and all community meetings. So it was, but by the time 2012 rolled around and I ran and served 4 years again. So by 2016, my husband said, you know, do you think you could slow down a little bit and spend a little more time with me? And I said, I sure can. So
well,
it
thank
was
you for
just,
your service. I know it's a big commitment to do that.
Yeah.
people don't realize how much time governing board members and probably a lot of elected people spend. There's a lot of learning and there's a lot of meetings and there's a lot
to
of
read
time.
each week in the packet, right?
Yes, there's a lot to learn, and then there's lots of professional development that hopefully a lot of governing board members go to, so that you learn about budgets and policies, and it's actually the job of the governing board to supervise, hire, hopefully not fire, but if necessary, the superintendent. So there's a lot they have to understand about the management and operations of the school district. So.
And about budgets, for school budgets.
Yeah, that's always complicated. Every year I was on the board, except the last one, we cut millions of dollars. And those are very hard decisions. You have to understand where all the money goes and what is the purpose, and try to be as effective with programs and as possible. So there is a lot to understand and learn. And I'm always grateful that people are willing to step up and not only run, because campaigning is not easy, but then just serving.
Definitely.
I enjoyed it.
For those who don't know, can you share all the cities and communities that are part of the Kyrene School District?
Yeah,
It's a big area.
it is, and that is something unique about the Kyrene School District. First of all, it is pre-K through 8th grade, so it doesn't include high school. The high school district that Kyrene feeds into is Tempe Union High School District, but Kyrene includes half of Guadalupe, the town of Guadalupe, part of the Gila River Indian Reservation, South Tempe, south of Baseline, I believe, or it's south of Guadalupe. I should know that right off the top of my head, and Northwest Chandler.
And Ahwatukee.
Oh yes, thank you, Ahwatukee
Which
Foothills.
is actually part of the city of Phoenix,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
And
So
a big area, so it's a lot of different municipalities are involved. right?
yeah, and when I was on the board, board members kind of took turns, and some said, you know, we'll go to Tempe functions, and some of us would go to Chandler functions, and some to Phoenix. Some of us would go to all of them, but there's definitely a lot of important relationships with all of those municipalities, for sure. And with my involvement with the town of Guadalupe, I ended up getting offered a job. Well, I had to apply, but at the Guadalupe Library. So that was something that, had I not been on the governing board, I probably wouldn't have had my toe in the town of Guadalupe with their education programs. And so I had a wonderful experience working at the Guadalupe Library, which I just loved. And I used to say my dream was somebody would lock me in a bookstore and not come back and get me, because that would be a dream. So it was almost the case working at the library. And then I also worked with the Guadalupe Teen Court program, and I ended up being their program manager and advisor for many years. I'm still a strong supporter.
And what does that do exactly? What is the
Guadalupe Teen Court
program?
Those are teen volunteers. They serve in a capacity of judge, jurors, attorneys, and they hear cases of actual teen offenders. So a teen that's committed a crime of graffiti, or sometimes assault or drinking, or all kinds of crimes, come before the basically a jury of their peers, a court of their peers, and they talk about their case and they're questioned. And then what's significant is the teen court members assign consequences. We don't call it punishment, it's consequences. So they may have to write letters of apology or community service. There's various consequences that they may be asked to write a poster, draw a poster that has to do with anti-graffiti or something. So kind of by talking to the defendant, the teen court members get an idea of what might be some good consequences. And so the teen volunteers are so significant. They show up every week, hear cases, and adjudicate cases, and so I just can't say enough good things
So
about
it's a real, it's not just a practice thing, it's the real deal. Is
right,
that correct?
right. It's part of the
Okay.
Maricopa County court
Part of the court system.
And Guadalupe Teen Court doesn't just have students from Guadalupe.
Mhm.
There's kids that go to Marcos, which is in Tempe, Tempe Prep, which is
Mhm.
obviously in Tempe, some from Mountain Point and Desert Vista, and we've had students from Corona as well. So
Mhm.
students don't have to live in Guadalupe to be part of Guadalupe Teen Court. And since the pandemic, the cases are on Zoom.
All right, and not everyone probably know this, but the town of Guadalupe has a culture. Is it Native American? Is it Hispanic? What is it?
Yeah, it's kind of half Pasquayaki Native American
okay.
and half Hispanic or Latino, and it's a wonderful, rich culture with lots of traditions. And it was really fun to learn about those things when I worked at the library, because there's lots of programming that members of the community come in for, and so. Yeah,
which is right on the edge of Tempe, in between Tempe and Phoenix, right by the Buttes. Is that where it is?
And there's a lot of people that I've met from Tempe that go there for Mexican food and farmers markets. You know, there's
It's a good place to get piñatas for parties, right?
Yeah. And now I hear there's a new coffee shop at Avenida del Yaqui, which is the same as Priest, and also Guadalupe. So at that corner there's a new coffee shop, I hear.
Okay. All right, let's back up a little bit to your high school years. What kind of extracurricular activities did you do, and can you just take me through how that maybe led you into journalism and some of the other things you did with news reporting and writing for the newspapers over the years?
Yeah, I didn't have a whole lot of time to be involved in extracurriculars in high school, because I would either go work for my dad at his office, or when I got to go with my girlfriend to her work, then soon I got a job at Bob Brannigan's, and that was right after school. So
I was school or working.
Yeah, I was at school or working, and even my senior year, I was involved in it was called COE at the time, Cooperative Office Education. Had a great teacher at Corona, Mrs. Sandy Swanson, who was wonderful, and I took things like shorthand and typing. You know, shorthand really dates you, but it was great for taking notes in college. But so I didn't have a lot of, I wasn't in sports or extracurricular, except that I just loved school and then would go home and work. But when I went to ASU, there was a couple years there, and then I got married. So I stopped school, I stopped college, and we were down in Tucson, and I actually enrolled at U of A, went on campus, and said, oh, I just feel like such a traitor. I can't go to the school. So sorry, U of A people, but I just didn't feel right about it. So when we did move back, I actually, because now my dad wasn't paying my tuition, I started at MCC. And I was taking education classes and had intended to be a teacher, because my teachers at Corona were a really strong influence on me, and I wanted to be a teacher. But there was one night where I had like a little break, and so I took a journalism class, and I just loved it. All the articles we had to write a how-to article and a biography and a community news and just various articles throughout the semester, and I just loved it. And it turns out one of my articles got published in the Arizona Republic, and another one got published in Tempe Magazine, which was a great magazine covering Tempe at the time. And so I had a little one at home, and I was writing and publishing articles, and so I didn't finish college at the time, because I thought, I have my hands full. I'm, having another baby and writing articles. So, and I actually had another business too. So I didn't finish college at the time. But I just kept writing.
Did you go back later?
I did go back later, but I was very lucky that I was able to write community news for Wrangler News. I wrote a column for a long time for the Arizona Republic, Community News, Neighbors, and I wrote for a magazine in Scottsdale, but it was distributed throughout the state, called Today's Arizona Woman. It was business profiles and consumer articles that I wrote. I even got to interview Eddie Basha. That was a wonderfully fun interview to do, and just having the opportunity to interview people in the community was just a joy to me. I loved writing articles. So.
All right, that's great. Your neighborhood up in Tempe, do you remember the name of it?
Oh yeah, Linden Park.
Linden Park?
Lindon,
Okay.
Linden Park. And I think the first houses were built in the late 60s. And even my houses were built in the early 70s. I mean, they weren't, they're older houses for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think I noticed when I was looking briefly at your tree, someone in your family is buried at Double Butte Cemetery.
Oh yeah, my dad. He
yes.
loved Tempe so much. I mean, he moved here in 70. He had several successful businesses here, and he loved Tempe so much. And when he was still alive, he said that he wanted to be buried in Double Butte, and so he actually found somebody that was selling. Well, he made me find somebody. I found somebody, and that was selling their plot, and so he's there. Yeah, and I go visit him all the time.
All right.
Yeah.
We had, I don't know, you were here when Jerry Brock was interviewed or not, but he is also planning to be buried there, and so.
It's a very nice place, I think. My dad is buried in the part that's the lawn with, because there's the older pioneer section, and my dad's in the newer section.
Yeah.
But
there's a movement being led by you, Hallman, to refurbish the cemetery and get it
all
fixed up more.
Yeah, it's, there's obviously so many amazing people buried there, but I was glad my dad's wish was able to be, to come to fruition, and he did. He passed away in April 2004, and he had a several years bout with colon cancer, but he was tough, and he got through a few years at least. Yeah.
Well, that's a special tie for you two to get away, have part of them close by, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. How have your travels affected the way you see Tempe? When you go away and then come back to Tempe, the Chandler area, where you live in the East Valley?
I definitely felt out of place when we lived in Tucson. I'm sure Tucson's a wonderful place for people that grew up there or like it there, but there's just something so welcoming and neighborly and also diverse. I love how Tempe and even Chandler, there are arts and there's history and there's activities and there's neighborhood events. I mean, there's nice people. So I just never, I don't even think we met any neighbors when we lived in Tucson. It just didn't feel as welcoming. So, and then I haven't traveled all over the world. My husband has, but I can tell you, he certainly is happy when he comes home. Yeah. We just love it here. And people ask us all the time, are you going to move? I'm like, nope, we're never moving. Never.
Well, you have good friends here too, right?
Yeah. And even though a couple of my kids have moved out of state, I'm sure we won't move unless, at some point we have to go live with them or something, because we're too old or something.
Well, Michelle, what are your thoughts of anything we haven't talked about tonight? What would you like to share?
Let's see.
I can give you a better prompt than that if you want. It was pretty wide open, wasn't it?
I've tried to think if there were some things I wanted to share about about loving Tempe, living in Tempe. Serving on the board was big. I will say that because I still own houses in Tempe, I do care a lot about the people that are elected to serve on the city council, and I will often support their campaigns and meet the candidates to see how they feel. And sometimes there's issues that come up in our neighborhood, and I have been able to go to council members and say, can you look into this? Can you address this? And they're very responsive. So.
When you say in your neighborhood where you have your
rental properties,
property,
I can't vote for these city council people, but they still address the issues, and so I really appreciate that it seems like the city and the city council members want their neighborhoods to be good. They want to be responsive to residents, and I really appreciate that, because it's, you know, it's possible that they could say, you know, you can't even vote for me. Why would we even pay attention to you? You know, but they're very responsive, and I appreciate that. Where my rental properties are, for, I don't know, whatever, 1955 to 2008, however many years that is, there was Cook Christian Training School right next door to my properties, and that was a Native American leadership training school for many years, and it was a wonderful neighbor in the neighborhood, but then they sold the property and a student housing was built there. And that was a big shock to a little residential neighborhood, to have hundreds of college kids going up and down our quiet little streets. And the city was very responsive in mitigating exit and entrance to the building, and a few other things, parking and things. So what could have been just a horrible disruption for a wonderful little neighborhood wasn't as bad as it could have been. So
That's good to hear.
yeah.
And we've heard that a lot, with that Tempe has that small town feel sometimes, that we actually do know a lot of our elected leaders, you know, by first name basis, right?
Yeah.
When Corey came in, and they respond when we have concerns.
Exactly, and I think you know, now happens to be a campaigning time, but it's I would advise residents to really go meet the candidates and keep communication. And it doesn't even hurt to send a compliment every now and then. You don't have to just complain about things, but I try to have ongoing positive communications and see them at events, so that, you know, heaven forbid, if something comes up, maybe they'll be responsive. But I have a feeling that they would be responsive even if I hadn't met them at a campaign event or something, because we hear it all the time that they do respond. Now, everybody's not going to be happy with everything all the time. I know there's a couple people in my Tempe neighborhood that are still not happy, like 5 years later, or however long it's been, that there's a college housing right at the end of our street. But you know, there's some things you progress, and you
can't win them all, right?
Yeah, but they've addressed, you know, a lot of the issues. So yeah.
I remember what we need to talk about. When Jerry Brock was interviewed about his business and the car parts business, you said you wanted to talk more about your father's business.
Oh, my dad did have several businesses, and one was, it was called Unique Classic Cars.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure that he started this business because at one point we must have had 15 cars parked in our driveway and front drive, or the street, and my mom, bonus mom, said, you know, you've got to find a place for these cars. This is getting ridiculous. And they were all very cool, antique and classic cars. My dad just loved cars. And so he did buy a lot, and then he ended up, he would locate cars for people. He dealt with a lot of Mercedes and Corvettes, but also old cars. At our wedding, we drove 1940, oh gosh, I'm going to forget, but it was a 1940 something
your driveway
Roadster.
car?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I just know that he had to have called Jerry's, you know,
to get parts. Sometimes.
yes, because he was always getting parts and fixing up
where was the
cars.
lot? Where was your father's business?
Yeah, that was 40th Street in Winslow, which is just a hop over the Tempe border into Phoenix. So there's University.
So it's around the Broadway curves, kind of that area, or
a
not
little
quite?
bit farther west.
Okay.
So kind of right by the airport.
Okay.
And
so you worked there for him?
yes, worked there and driving cars back and forth. There was an auction nearby, and so sometimes I would drive cars from there, and
You get to go to the auction?
I went to the auction a lot, but I didn't find any of it interesting. It was just, I was just doing my job. I wasn't as interested in cars as my dad, And plus I had to do a lot of the work of cleaning and
Uh-huh.
accounting and stuff. So it was just a job to me. I didn't find it quite as interesting as my dad. Now I look back and I think of all the interesting cars he had, and it's very interesting. But back when I was 15, 16, it wasn't as interesting. And I was actually driving before I was 16. I got pulled over coming from his car lot. I was driving a really long Cadillac from his office. It was like 9 o'clock at night, and I'm like, Dad, I have to go home. I have school in the morning. He's still working. He's like, take that car, here's the keys. And I got stopped by the police, and I wasn't even old enough to drive, but I didn't get a ticket or anything. I must have looked like I had an honest face and like I was gonna be home soon or something. But I'll never forget that. That was working with my dad too late, you know, and he did work a lot, which is, that he just loved working. And so he had the car dealership, but he also had a spa manufacturing company, above ground spas, and it was called Carefree Spas, and sold a lot of spas all over the country and locally as well. And my husband actually worked a couple summers in his factory, which was near the same location as the car dealership. He had a big lot of had a couple different businesses, and my husband put tile on spas a couple summers, and then he had another company right in that same area called Waterlube, and it was still around. It's a waterproof lubricant for pool equipment, and what was, I think, funny is it would come in these giant, like 50-something gallon tubs, and it's grease basically, and we would have to pump it with this hydraulic pump into these little 1-ounce containers, put labels on them, lids, put them in a little case, and he sold this waterproof lubricant all over the world. And back when I was 15, 16, we would get paid $20 an hour to box up this, to pump and label, and that was amazing money for a teenager.
Yeah.
And so every one of his kids pumped Waterlube, and my husband pumped Waterlube, and now my brother has that business, but it was right from Tempe, Arizona, and I still have little Waterlube containers that I can show that he started it right here in Tempe, Arizona. So he was a very entrepreneurial, very enterprising person, and so it was a good influence and fun to have him as a dad. Yeah.
Wonderful. Your Chandler Arts Commission chairing probably keeps you pretty busy. Are there any other organizations that you're involved with, for the Chamber of Commerce's, or?
I do
Wellness or
love
anything?
the Chandler Arts Commission.
Uh-huh.
I still am connected with Kyrene,
Uh-huh.
and I do things to support the school district.
The foundation?
There's also Keep Kyrene Strong is organization that supports the bonds and overrides of the school district.
That's
so
right,
the idea
okay.
is to get out and educate people
Uh-huh.
about the budget and what the bonds and overrides do for the school district. And right now I'm planning an event in a couple weeks to celebrate the exterior renovations of the district office building. First time ever that they've renovated the building, and Dr. Furlong will be there to speak, and there'll be a little ribbon cutting, and we've done some videos with Dr. Furlong. He'll talk about some comments of the history of Kyrene. So I just had this idea to let's bring some of the past and the present and kind of recognize the future of Kyrene. And so I want people that have been kind of long gone from Kyrene to still feel connected.
That sounds like a nice event. Be sure to let us know.
Yeah, I'm really
when
so
that is.
little things like that. I still try to do things to connect.
That
the
district office is at Warner and Kyrene Road, right? The northwest corner, and that is in the city of Tempe. You know, it covers all these other cities too.
Yeah, the administration building is definitely right there.
I think you were involved when you were on the board of helping to get some of the artwork behind the board members, so it wasn't just a blank wall, is that?
Yeah,
right?
that was a fun project. The back wall behind the governing board was always plain, and I just thought, this is so boring. So I worked with the art teachers, and they worked with students and got ideas for what this mural could be, and they decided to make it the art teachers' mosaic. So they sketched it out based on suggestions from students, and then placed mosaic tiles. There's a sun and students, and it's just beautiful and colorful. And when they were actually doing it, my job was, I had no idea this was a job in mosaic, but there's a lot of washing and emptying muddy water. And so I was the water hauler for the mural. But now every time I look at a board meeting and see that beautiful mural back there, I'm just so proud that it's beautiful and colorful. And then I was involved with the Kyrene de la Paloma Arts Integration Academy. Mm-hmm. There was a time when they wanted to repurpose the school, and we did some studies and made it an arts integration academy, so that arts are integrated into every subject of that school, and so every classroom. And one of the things they did at that school were to paint ceiling tiles, and so the governing board room has a ceiling tile from every school. So every Kyrene school, if you come to a board meeting, you can look up and there's your school. And so it's colorful when you look up, and it's colorful when you look ahead. And then there's also some student artwork displayed. So it's definitely more colorful than it used to be, and I'm very excited that they've kept that up.
Good job on that,
yeah.
too.
It's fun. And I mean, there were arts, and every year there's a student art exhibit in Kyrene. I always still go to that. The art teachers in Kyrene are incredible, and the student artwork is amazing. And then there's music and plays, and I still go to those things too. So
mm-hmm.
it's
well, your old high school's not that far from where you live. It's just a couple miles away, isn't it?
My boys were very involved in theater at Corona,
mm-hmm.
and I went to all the shows, but I
mm-hmm.
haven't gone to any since they graduated. I should. I haven't even thought of that. So I should support the programs at Corona as well. Yeah.
Right.
Because they do some great
Dwayne,
things.
do you have any thoughts or questions for Michelle?
Two questions. They're related. One is, if someone wants to get involved in the community and doesn't know how can they do it? And then the other related question is, why is it important?
Well, for me, being involved in the community, I can say this is why I think it's important, is for me, it has built relationships, friends, a connection to the community that I couldn't imagine I would have if I hadn't have been involved in the teen court and the schools and campaigns and the neighborhoods. So I think that it really benefits not only the people you're helping, but it benefits you as well with those relationships and connections. So that's why. And I feel very, very blessed that I've been able to do that, because I know some people feel that they're working and raising kids and they don't have time, and I have worked it into my life that I could do that. So I feel very blessed that I've been able to do that. But ways that people could do it, because not everybody has a whole lot of time, and some people do have time and they just don't know where to put it. But things like school events and, like I said, campaign events where you can meet candidates. Before I ran, I would have never thought of helping on a campaign, and I wouldn't even know what to do. I would have been too shy to do it. But once you're around people that are doing it, then they tell you how, and you feel more comfortable. So I think even if it's something that you think, well, I would never help with a campaign, or I'm too busy to help with the school things, you just ask, go to events, ask what help is needed. And if there's a certain area, like maybe you're very passionate about homeless people, and helping homeless people, there are places in the city that serve homeless people, whether it's giving out bottled water or whether it's serving on a board that serves homeless people. So there's whatever your interest is. I also think that, like for the city of Tempe, there's boards and commissions, and residents can serve on these boards and commissions for public art and history. And So if you just skim through the options, maybe there's an area that's of interest, and then you can serve on a board or commission. And I think that's very valuable too, because you're serving your community, but you're also meeting people and helping people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Mckell, it's been a pleasure speaking with you tonight. Thank you for sharing your memories.
Well,
Is there
thanks.
anything else you want to tell your children or future grandchildren?
I want some future grandchildren. That's what I want to tell my children.
I know
Is
you
I would
do.
like some grandchildren.
Someday.
I have wonderful, wonderful kids, and so I'm sure someday I will have grandchildren. But I really feel blessed that we live in such a great community, and so I love the work that you do here with Connected Tempe and people sharing their stories. It's been a little uncomfortable and awkward being on this side of the camera, but I love talking about my grandparents and my family. So that part has been fun. So, and my husband too, of course. I'm very grateful that we've been here for so long. So that part has been fun, and I look
Thank
forward
you for
to
taking a turn in the seat.
I look forward to being on that side again when we
We'll
can
get
ask
you back
other
on this
people.
side.
But thank you for what
You
you
did
guys
great.
do, because
Thanks.
this is important.
Thanks, Mckell.
Thank you.
You're welcome.